This is still a community that is very much under attack and still having to highlight the crisis that is going on there in hearings like this.
Eugene, there were 12 times as many incidents against the LGBTQ community this year alone, according to one estimate. GLAAD also notes 124 protests against drag events this year. So this is reaching a real crisis stage, correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. When you talk to advocates on the ground, they, like Ali was saying, they celebrated yesterday with President Biden on the South Lawn on that bill. But then they said at the exact same time, we've seen this rise in not just actual physical violence, but physical threats. People standing outside with guns and tactical gear outside of drag shows, calling queer people groomers and saying they're coming to get your kids. There's been this rise in political speech that is anti-LGBTQ+. And I think that is where there's such a focus with when I talk to advocates, that's scary, right? Because those are the places in which, this is a free country, people are allowed to say whatever they want. But then those kinds of things they say have consequences. And that's why you see things that happen at Club Q, because you dehumanize people when you do those kinds of things. And I think, the concept that people are going out and grooming children, it is just also a conspiracy theory. And conspiracy theories work because you have a drag show or a drag queen reading to kids, that is something that some people are uncomfortable with, but then advocates will say, don't bring your child to a drag show or to a place where a drag queen is reading. But it feels like an inflection point for this country, because while there have been what some advocates have described to me, the low-hanging fruit at this point of an acceptance of same-sex marriage, or at least a tolerance of that we've kind of moved on from that conversation, but then a rise in violence against especially Black trans women in this country. And those are the kinds of things that there's a big concern of, in addition to the actual shootings and all of that, which is so complicated. Gun control and gun safety is already so complicated. And you add in how people feel about LGBTQ+ folks, and that makes it even much harder for our leaders to figure out what to do.
It's the vitriol and the gun culture is all coming together. Nadine, let's talk about where we are as a country. Does it make a difference that the president and the First Lady had, 1,000 people on the South Lawn celebrating the signing of the same-sex marriage protection law yesterday? Does that help? Does that change the climate at all?
I think it helps in this way. It underscores that the majority of Americans actually do support marriage equality for the LGBTQ community. They actually support non-discrimination policies. The challenge is this. It's not simply a question of whether the majority is with us. It is now the danger of this weaponized, growing sort of domestic terrorists who wish to push back on that progress. And I think everyone is noting the perfect symbolism of one day of celebration of marriage equality and aspects of that being codified by Congress and signed into law by the president, followed immediately by the grim reminder and reality that hate violence against us is increasing, as the rhetoric aimed at us by politicians who see it as a way to, raise money and garner votes is also increasing. And we've got to deal with both realities that, yes, we are making progress. The world I grew up in is a lot different than the world my 11-year-old son is growing up in. But that is actually, I think, where we are in the most precarious position, because most people do not agree with the extremists, the folks who are sending bomb threats to hospitals that provide gender-affirming care, the people who are picketing outside theme parks, bringing guns to pride events, shutting down, drag queen reading hour so that the parents and kids who are there for a good time to enjoy, a day at the library are now menaced by armed guards. And we are seeing that in Florida in particular, because we are in many ways at the tip of the spear. We have two people who want to be the Republican nominee for president, and they are trying to outflank each other to the right. And they have done so by putting a target squarely on not just the LGBT community overall, which they have. And every time you hear these old tropes that we used to hear back in the Anita Bryant days, just defining LGBTQ people as a threat to children, Every time you hear that, remember that it was Ron DeSantis who was trafficking in that as he began, very clearly to position himself for the presidency. So while Pulse shocked the conscience of the nation because it seemed to come out of nowhere, in so many ways, what happened in Colorado Springs at Club Q felt like the inevitable, pathway that these extremists have put the country on. And the most important thing right now is that everybody understand that the rise in racist rhetoric, the rise in anti-Semitism, the anti-LGBTQ attacks are all springing from the same well, and we have a responsibility to respond to it collectively and address the domestic terrorism at the heart of it as the serious threat that it is.